In the quiet hours before dawn, when the horizon still held the faint promise of morning, the silence above Yadina was broken by a deep, mechanical growl that didn't belong to peace. The sound came from engines circling in the sky, heavy and menacing, moments before the guided missiles slashed through the air. The explosions struck with ruthless precision, tearing apart the province's only communications tower and a nearby outpost. Within seconds, 3 lives were lost: 2 soldiers standing guard and a woman whose small home crumbled under the shockwave. 7 more were left wounded, their cries echoing through the dust and debris. This was no mistake, no tragic accident. It was a planned strike, carried out from a U.S. military base across the border in Niger, executed without warning, without consent, and in clear violation of international law. But from the wreckage rose something stronger than despair. By sunrise, whispers of anger spread through the capital, and by noon, they had grown into a roar. People flooded the streets, drums beating in rhythm with their defiance, flags raised high above the crowd. In the heart of Ouagadougou, Captain Ibrahim Traoré appeared before the nation, not as a leader pleading for calm, but as a voice of defiance, wearing his familiar camouflage. He declared that the attack was not just an assault on Burkina Faso's soil. It was an attack on the very right of Africans to exist as free and sovereign people. His words struck like thunder across the airwaves, carried to more than 8 million listeners who sat glued to their radios and screens. Within hours, the army was on high alert. Border posts were reinforced, defense points moved to higher readiness, and the capital braced itself. But while the military prepared, the people rose with heart. By late afternoon, Revolution Square became a sea of color and resistance. Nearly 35,000 citizens gathered, children with handmade armbands, veterans with old medals pinned to their chests, and women carrying food and water for strangers as if serving family. Their chant rolled like a tide across the square: our land, our right, our future. It was not fear that filled the air, but fire. News traveled fast. In neighboring cities, on radio shows, and across African social media, one question began to surface: was this strike meant to intimidate, or had it accidentally awakened something far bigger? Analysts in Nairobi, Dakar, and Lagos debated on live television whether this was a strategic warning from Washington or a miscalculation that would only fuel Africa's growing push for unity. Meanwhile, in Washington, the Pentagon described the strike as a counterterrorism mission. They claimed militants had been targeted, though no evidence, no names, no proof was offered. For many Africans, the explanation sounded all too familiar: the old language of intervention, dressed in the garments of security. But intimidation was already unraveling. By the end of the day, what had been intended as a show of power had instead transformed Captain Ibrahim into more than a national leader. He had become a continental symbol of defiance. Radios buzzed late into the night with voices of ordinary people, some trembling with fear, others charged with resolve. If they can strike here today, one caller said, they can strike anywhere tomorrow. We must stand together now or be left alone later. By the following morning, the shockwaves stretched far beyond Burkina Faso. In Addis Ababa, the African Union called an emergency meeting, one of the fastest in its history. Ministers from over 40 nations joined in a virtual summit, and from capital to capital, the message was the same. This was not just Burkina Faso's fight, it was Africa's. When Traoré's face appeared on their screens, the room fell silent. His words were measured but sharp. If the sovereignty of one African nation can be violated without consequence, then no African nation is truly safe. His call resonated far beyond the walls of that meeting, echoing into homes, radios, and streets across the continent. Crowds marched in Mali, vigils were lit in Guinea, and even in Nairobi, where ties to the West run deep, protesters held signs demanding African sovereignty. The chant spread from city to city, nation to nation. We have had enough. State television began airing nightly updates, reassuring the public with reports on security measures, humanitarian aid deliveries, and ongoing talks with neighboring governments. The message was steady and deliberate. The nation was in control. At the same time, civil society organizations, while strongly supportive of Traoré's defiance, started demanding greater transparency. They wanted clear answers about the supposed terrorist threat that Washington claimed had justified the strike. "Our sovereignty is sacred," said one prominent lawyer in Ouagadougou, "but our leaders must defend it with truth, not just speeches." Still, public opinion overwhelmingly leaned in Traoré's favor. His approval rating, which had stood at 62% before the attack, surged to nearly 80% afterward. Too many. The image of a young African leader standing tall against a global power was not just inspiring, it was vindicating. In Washington, the Burkina Faso strike quickly became a point of controversy. The Senate Armed Services Committee demanded private briefings from the Pentagon. Several lawmakers voiced concern about the lack of consultation with Congress, with one senator warning that carrying out military strikes inside sovereign nations without their consent was not only reckless but dangerous, both morally and strategically. The State Department attempted to reframe the operation as a carefully planned counterterrorism action, but leaks soon revealed that neither Burkina Faso nor the African Union had been consulted beforehand. That revelation fueled widespread criticism from human rights advocates and African policy experts. Abroad, reactions fractured along predictable lines. France urged dialogue but stopped short of condemning Washington outright. Germany emphasized that no partnership could survive without trust. Russia and China seized the moment, accusing the West of practicing modern-day imperialism, while publicly offering support to Burkina Faso. Global media reflected these divisions. Major U.S. networks focused on the alleged terror threat. Outlets like NPR and The Intercept questioned the legality of the strike. Meanwhile, African news platforms kept the sovereignty issue front and center, replaying clips of Traoré's speeches and broadcasting footage of rallies across the continent. In think tanks from Washington to Brussels, one question echoed repeatedly: had the United States underestimated the backlash? Burkina Faso wasted no time recalibrating its foreign policy. All military cooperation agreements with Western nations were placed under review. Joint training programs with U.S. forces were scaled back. In contrast, military exchanges with non-Western allies quietly expanded. The most dramatic shift came when Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger signed the Sahel Shield Alliance, a mutual defense pact vowing that any attack on one without consent would be treated as an attack on all. Analysts described it as a direct challenge to Western influence in the region. Soon after, Algeria hosted closed-door meetings with Burkina Faso, Guinea, and Chad to discuss deeper African security cooperation. Proposals included shared intelligence, networks and funding pools to develop African-made military equipment, reducing reliance on Western arms. The consequences for Washington were immediate. Diplomatic access to Sahelian leaders dropped to the lowest level in decades. Pentagon officials admitted that the Sahel Shield Alliance could severely complicate U.S. counterterrorism operations. European analysts worried that the vacuum would quickly be filled by Russia, Turkey, and China. Inside Burkina Faso, however, these moves only boosted Traoré's popularity further. Polls showed more than 80% of citizens supporting his foreign policy, citing national dignity and African unity as their top reasons. For decades, African leaders who challenged Western dominance had often found themselves isolated, overthrown, or quietly sidelined. But Traoré was defying that pattern, not with empty slogans, but with decisive strategic action. 2 months later, the crisis deepened when an unauthorized foreign drone strike in neighboring Niger killed 4 civilians during what was described as an anti-terror operation. The parallels with Burkina Faso were undeniable. Within a single day, Niger's transitional leaders reached out to Ouagadougou with a historic request: a joint declaration of resistance. The very next morning, President Traoré stood side by side with Niger's leadership in Niamey, flanked by their defense ministers. The two leaders faced the cameras. Traoré's words were slow, deliberate, and powerful. The era of unilateral foreign strikes in Africa is over. For millions watching live across the continent, this was not mere rhetoric, it was the image they had been waiting for. 2 African heads of state united in open defiance of outside interference. The ripple effect was immediate. Mali, Guinea, and Chad issued similar statements. In East Africa, Tanzania and Uganda voiced support, even in nations historically aligned. With the West, parliamentary debates began questioning whether foreign military bases should continue operating. Without stricter oversight, across the Sahel, solidarity gained a new face. In markets, ordinary people began referring to it as Africa's shield. On social media, hashtags like Africa Unites and Sahel Strong spread like wildfire. In Washington, confidence gave way to unease as analysts warned that this public show of African unity could restrict U.S. operations in the region for years to come. In Paris, military experts quietly admitted they had underestimated the strength of the African backlash. Traoré recognized the weight of the moment. He avoided language that might escalate the standoff further, but he refused to soften his core message. Africa's sovereignty was not negotiable. Behind the scenes, his government worked to turn symbolic unity into real cooperation. Planning for the Sahel Shield's first joint military exercises was accelerated. Proposals for shared intelligence and coordinated border patrols circulated among member states. Economic policies began shifting too. Traoré's administration pushed reforms ensuring that mining contracts, especially in gold and manganese, would benefit the nation rather than foreign corporations. Aid cut off by Western donors was quietly replaced by funding from African and Asian partners. Predictions of an economic collapse never materialized. Soon after, another powerful moment unfolded. At an extraordinary African Union summit in Addis Ababa, Traoré, the youngest head of state in the room, walked alongside leaders twice his age. Dressed in his signature camouflage uniform, he spoke with the calm authority of a seasoned statesman. "Sovereignty is not a gift," he said. "It is a responsibility, and it belongs to those willing to defend it." His words spread far beyond the conference walls. In the streets of Ouagadougou, in Bamako's cafes, in Nairobi's open air markets, people repeated them. The young captain had not sought this fight, but when it arrived at his nation's doorstep, he chose defiance over submission, unity over fear. In doing so, he lit a fire that spread from the Sahel to the southern tip of Africa. The story of Burkina Faso is far from over. Pressure from outside will continue, and those threatened by a self-reliant Africa will not stop trying to undermine it. But the spirit awakened here cannot be easily extinguished. As Traoré declared, "We do not ask permission to be free. We stand and take it." Those words now echo across borders from Ouagadougou to Bamako, from Niamey to Nairobi, from Dar es Salaam to Johannesburg, in the hearts of millions who refuse to bow. What was meant to break a small nation has instead ignited a continental awakening. It is a reminder that sovereignty is not ink on paper, nor promises from outsiders. It is land, people, and the unshakable right to decide one's own future. And now, the question remains, will you stand with those who will not kneel? If you believe Africa's dignity is not for negotiation, let your voice be heard. A new Africa rises, an Africa that bows to no one.